Welcome to Remnants of a Sound Blast. It's been a little while since I made a video. About 2 weeks ago, I kind of had a health scare. I thought that I had liver disease. I was having pains in my back and my sides. It was excruciating pain. It wouldn't go away. I had a urine test. It came back. I had some protein and blood in my urine, which I found out later that that's pretty much normal as long as it's not an excessive amount. I had a full panel blood work done just to see if there was anything going on, and everything came back looking great. No signs of any issues whatsoever as far as the blood work goes. But physically, I was feeling bad for a few weeks, and that's one thing about me. I don't know if you do the same thing, but I tend to Google things a lot. And Google could be a good or bad thing, because as far as, like, for instance, just like sickness, like I'm talking about, you could have anything from a headache or a cold to cancer, and you have some of the same symptoms as far as like body pain and the list goes on and on. So what I'm getting at is you could pretty much drive yourself nuts looking at stuff like that, because it could be something very mild and you're thinking it's like a worst case scenario type deal, which is what I was doing. So I'm glad I just went ahead and got the blood work done. I would suggest anyone, even if you're like me and you don't like going to doctors at all, unless you absolutely have to, the least thing you could do for yourself is have a full panel blood work done every year. I'm telling you, it'll help you. It's quick, it's painless. Besides the needle, it's really quick, and it'll tell the doctors everything that they need to know about you. So, if you have any kind of like prostate cancers or anything like that, it's going to show up in your blood work. So, as a suggestion off the topic of music, I would highly recommend having blood work done once a year, especially if you're over the age of 30 or 40. I'm pushing 50. I'll be 50 later on this year, but hey, I feel great. I really do. Besides that little scare that lasted about 2 weeks, and it just went away. I don't know what it was all about. It might have been dehydration, because that's another thing, is I don't drink enough water. I tend to drink a lot of coffee, but not enough water. Even when I'm outside, like going all day, cutting grass or whatever, it's like I rarely take a break and drink any water. So I've been trying to be more mindful of that for myself, to kind of just slow down or take breaks, drink water, especially if you're outside working and stuff. So that's just some little tips off the subject of music. But today I'm going to do an essentials listening video. Originally, I was going to do a top 20, my favorite top 20 albums. And then when I started going through all my stuff, I'm like, man, there's no way that I can do just 20. It's just almost impossible for me. I would leave out so many great things. What I try to do is, even with this essentials video, it's more or less based on, things that I hold really close to me. As far as when I first discovered music, there were quite a few albums that I still listen to that, like, these particular albums made me get into rock. So they might not necessarily be your favorite albums. Some of them are kind of like, kind of weird as far as like, the rock and the metal and stuff. Some of them kind of like, oh, I didn't think that he would pick something like that. But yeah, some of them, when I was 13 or 14, when I started getting into music, some of these albums were just out at the time. Like, for instance, there's one that I'll give away because I don't have the album cover on me, is Eat 'Em and Smile from David Lee Roth. I'm not really a big fan of David Lee Roth as far as Van Halen goes. I prefer Sammy Hagar era, just because musically I think they were better. But I do get why people love Van Halen so much with David Lee Roth. That was an iconic lineup. He was a great frontman. As far as a singer, I think Sammy was a much better singer, but I get it. I get why a lot of people do like the David Lee Roth, Van Halen era. But what I'm getting at is, David Lee Roth had a solo album in 1986 called Eat 'Em and Smile. And I'm telling you, that album, that was one of the few albums that I got from BMG Music when I started off, starting to collect cassettes and CDs and stuff. And I listened to that record constantly. So like I said, I don't have that one in front of me. but that's just an example of something that you may not think somebody like me would pick based off of my past videos and talking about the things that I like. I've never really mentioned David Lee Roth unless it was like a recent video where I'm talking about how he cannot sing anymore along with some other guys. But anyway, that's one of my favorite albums of all time. Steve Vai's on that. He plays some really, really great guitar throughout the whole album. There's just something about that album that just, I can just listen to it all the time. Tobacco Road, Elephant Gun, Yankee Rose. There's a bunch of tracks on there that are really, really, really strong. But anyway, so I'm gonna do, I guess if you want to call this my top 50, even though I'm going to go over 50. And there are quite a few CDs that I do not have to show, but I'm just going to mention them real quick. But I'm going to start off, this is either going to be a top 50 or, like I say, you can call it an Essentials CD video. And my first one is Iron Maiden, Peace of Mind. Now, this is hands down my favorite Iron Maiden album. I love Somewhere in Time. I like Power Slave. I like Number of the Beast. But this one, I always find myself going back to start to finish. I don't think there's a bad song on here. There might be one that I fast forward, like might be Still Life or Quest for Fire. One of those two, I think I kind of fast forward over sometimes. But the last song on here, To Tame a Land, that's not a song that you hear people mention a lot unless it's, you know, like a Iron Maiden fanatic that's into deep cuts. You don't hear this song, To Tame a Land, play a lot on the radio, but it's one of the best ones on here. It starts off with Where Eagles Dare, which is a totally awesome Iron Maiden song. I love that drum fill when Nico starts it off with those triplets. Second song is Revelations. Flight of Icarus, Die With Your Boots On, I love that song. The Trooper, Still Life, Quest for Fire, Sun and Steel, and To Tame a Land. That's essential Iron Maiden right here. Like I say, Somewhere in Time, I can listen to that all day too. But this one is my go-to Iron Maiden. Jethro Tull, Aqualung. Even if you don't know a lot about Jethro Tull, I think everybody pretty much has heard at least one or two songs from Aqualung. Aqualung, Cross-Eyed Mary, and Locomotive Breath would probably be your three. But they have other songs like Hymn 43, My God, which is one of my favorite Jethro Tull songs, Mother Goose, Cheap Day Return, Slipstream, Wind Up, the last song, Wind Up. I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. This is a very strong album. And a little side note, I believe that they were recording this at the same time that Zeppelin was recording Zeppelin 4. I think they were kind of sharing the studio. And Jimmy Page popped his head in when Martin Barr, the guitarist from Jethro Tull, was playing the solo from Aqualung. He kind of like waved through him through the control room, and the guy had his headphones on. Martin Barr was playing a solo and kind of just nodded to him and just kept on going and just went through. And that's the famous solo that you hear, that iconic guitar solo on Aqualung. Jimmy Page was watching him lay that down. So that's some pretty cool rock and roll history. But this one and Songs from the Wood, I've been listening to a lot too. That's another one that I don't have to show, but Songs from the Wood is real folk rock, but it's also a little bit heavy too. So that's like prime listening, Aqualung and Songs from the Wood. If you want to get a little bit more technical, Thick as a Brick. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of Thick as a Brick. That's an awesome album too. It's very, very progressive. Probably their most progressive album besides Passion Play, but I can't listen to Passion Play. It's just too much. It's too all over the place. That album, when it came out, kind of separated Jethro Tull fans. You had some that absolutely loved it and other ones that absolutely hated it. I wouldn't say that I hate it per se, but I really don't like it. That's a nice way of saying I hate it. Anyway, Jethro Tull, Aqualung, Songs from the Wood, and Jethro Tull Benefit, which is the album just before Aqualung, is a really good album too. That's my three that I would suggest for essential listening, Jethro Tull. Next up, we have Pink Floyd. Probably my favorite album as of the last few years from Pink Floyd is Animals. This is essential listening. It's dark. The whole album is really dark. The lyrics are dark. The music's dark. It's got a certain atmosphere to it. It's a little bit of a depressing album, kind of on the lines of The Wall, but it's not as upbeat as The Wall is, you know. As much as The Wall has some really kind of like depressing type songs, they also have a few that kind of uplift. But this one is really, really kind of like a downer album, you know. Like I know Roger Waters wrote most of the music on here and the lyrics, but excellent guitar solos from David Gilmour. I think that's why I like it so much, is because there's not a lot of popular songs on here, but it's all great stuff. Where's the other ones that I have from Pink Floyd? I have The Wall. This was one of the first albums that I ever heard from Pink Floyd, way back in the day, probably in the late 80s, along with Dark Side of the Moon. When Dark Side of the Moon got in my possession, it wasn't long before I wrote lyrics to all these songs on my wall. Not in this room, but this was at my parents' house when I was a teenager. And I have one more to show you, if I can find it real quick. I had all of these laid out and everything. Here you go. Wish You Were Here. That's essential listening too. Shine On You Crazy Diamond. The song Wish You Were Here. Welcome to the Machine. That's a great song. Welcome to the Machine. This was probably my most listened to Pink Floyd album when I was, you know, a teenager, all the way up until probably my early 20s. And shortly after that, you know, were these just right behind them. And then, like I say, in the last probably 5 years, Animals has been my go-to. But on any given day, I could choose any four of these albums. I mean, you can't go wrong with any four of those Pink Floyds. Here's another one that I do not have. I have a substitute for it. But Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger. That is absolutely one of my favorite albums. But to show something from Soundgarden, I have an A-sides. I can't even remember where I got this from, but you know, it's got a few songs on here from Bad Motorfinger, but that album is essential Soundgarden and is definitely one of my top 20 albums. Soundgarden, Bad Motorfinger. Alice Cooper, Love It to Death. This is absolutely my favorite Alice Cooper album. This one and Killers. But everything on here, Caught in a Dream, the opener, I'm 18, Long Way to Go, Black Juju, It's My Body, Hallowed Be Thy Name, Second Coming, The Ballad of Dwight Fry, and Sunrise. I mean, I think this is a concept album. I haven't read too much about if they claimed it was or not, but it pretty much makes sense. The track listing, and I mean, I know all these songs by heart, so you know, I want to say it's a concept album to some point. But we recently saw Alice Cooper. If you watch my last video just before this one, we took our kids, ages 6, 7, and 10. We took all three of them to see Alice Cooper at the Beau Rivage, and it was so good. They really enjoyed it. It wasn't as loud as I thought it was going to be. They had earplugs in their ears when Alice Cooper first came on, because I was concerned that, you know, I don't want my kids hearing such loud music. It might damage their ears or something. But it was relatively not as loud as I thought it was going to be, so to speak. So we took the earplugs out and they loved it. I mean, you know, he put on a full show. He did the guillotine. He came out with the snake. He died on stage. You know, just everything that you saw back in those videos from the 70s, his whole persona, his whole, you know, theatrical, so to speak, like, you know, movie piece that he puts on with all the songs. He did all of that. I mean, he moves a little bit slower. He's not as energetic as he was. I mean, the guy's 70, what is he, 74, 75 years old? But he's got a really good, tight, young band. Everybody in the band's really good. The drummer's good. All of the guitar players, the bass players. It's a good band that he's got. But love it to death. Alice Cooper is essential Alice Cooper listening for me. Next, we go with Rage Against the Machine. This was another album that I listened to pretty often when it came out in the, early 90s, 92. Bomb track, Killing in the Name of, Take the Power Back, Settle for Nothing, Bullet in the Head, Know Your Enemy, Wake Up, Fistful of Steel, that's a really good one. Township Rebellion and Freedom. The rap rock thing's not really me. But, I mean, there's no denying that they have some really killer riffs, really solid, funky jams on this album. I mean, the vocals I can give or take, but it's part of the package. I mean, I can tolerate it because the music's so good. Rage Against the Machine. Another one I don't have the particular album for, but I have a substitute. Alice in Chains. This is unplugged, but my favorite Alice in Chains album is Dirt. Start to finish, that is the perfect album from Alice in Chains. Recently, I have listened to Facelift. That's a really good one too. That's their that's their debut album, Facelift. I actually have that one. I could have brought that one to show you, but this is good enough. But Alice in Chains, Dirt. That's another great essential listening from Alice in Chains. Here's one of my favorite albums from anybody of all time. Wishbone Ash, Argus. I guess that's how you say it. I guess you could say this is medieval rock, just as much as Jethro Tull. Time Was, Sometime World, Blowing Free, which is kind of an upbeat. That's probably the most upbeat commercial song on the album is Blowing Free. You can kind of tell that could have been a radio hit. Maybe it was back in the day. This was from 1972, so I wasn't even born yet. I was 1 year later. The King Will Come, Leaf and Stream. That's a really nice, calm, soothing, mellow track, Leaf and Stream. Warrior and Throw Down the Sword. All of these songs talk about kings and queens and battles and, claiming land and slaying people and all this stuff. Kind of like almost like a Conan the Barbarian soundtrack, but rock and roll. Wishbone Ash, August. That is a great album cover. I love that. I have this album cover blown up 11 by 17 in a frame in my living room where I usually do my videos. I'm doing it in the alternate room today because I've got the dogs and the cats running around, and the dogs just keep barking, and my family's not here. They by somebody's house enjoying a nice Sunday afternoon, so I figured this was a good time to do a video today and catch up with you guys because it's been a while. Again, Wishbone Ash, Argus. That is a great guitar rock album. Dual guitars. If you like medieval rock and dragons and wizards and talking about, sword battles and all this stuff, that's your go-to right here. I love this album. I remember when we went to Disney World a few years ago, I listened to this like the whole way there and half the way back or something crazy like that. I don't know, but I played it constantly. Here you go. Another one that came out in the late 90s, and I was a huge fan of this album and this band, Tool, Enema. Great, awesome album. Musically complicated, catchy. This is Tool. Personally, I think this is Tool at their finest hour. I love Undertow as well. Those two albums are, neck and neck for me. Even this one's a little bit more proggy. They kind of lost me after this one. I think the one after it was Lateralis, if I'm not mistaken, but I don't know much more about their album history after this one. They kind of lost me. They just started getting a little bit too, out there with the songs, so self-indulgent. It would take, 5-10 minutes for the song to kick in. It would all start off with tribal beats. Every song was a tribal beat that would just kind of build a bit. And, you know, it's kind of cool, you know, for songs to build sometimes, but it's like every track started getting the same way. It's like, come on, guys, you know, y'all been playing these songs for 20 minutes now. Get to the point, you know, hit me and go on to the next album. They just, or next song, rather, I'm sorry. But this, like I say, this is Tool's finest hour as far as I'm concerned. And another essential listening album, Tool Enema. Also Undertow, which I do have that. Yep. Undertow. Another awesome album. Has the song Sober, Intolerance, Prison Sex, Bottom, Crawl Away, Swamp Song, Undertow, 4 Degrees, Flood, and Disgustipated. This is the one when you let it play. Even after the CD's done, you just let it play, and then it skips to that weird song where he's saying, what is he saying? This is necessary type stuff. It's like they killing animals or whatever. But anyway, look, that's the back cover. When I saw these guys in 1998, they blew me away. Like the whole stage show, all of the shit that they were showing on the screen were like elephants doing stuff and animals, and it was really, it tripped me out. It actually kind of scared me a little bit. I was like, this is kind of crazy. Woo, that was a badass concert, man. I was on some substances, maybe just one substance, and man, when that stuff kicked in, and then they kicked in with the music and just all of the stuff behind them on the screen, all of that, like all at once, was just almost too much for me to handle. It's just one of those things I'll never forget how good that show was. Here you go. Danzig. Danzig's first album. Now, I love the second album too. Lucifuge 2. Is that how you say it? Lucifuge? I'm not sure. Correct me if I'm saying that wrong. But this one's got Twist of Cain, Not of This World, She Rise. That's a great song. Soul on Fire, Am I Demon, Mother. Everybody knows Mother. Even if you don't know who Danzig is, you've heard Mother before. Possession, End of Time, The Hunter, and Evil Thing. I mean, I'm sure you would agree with this. There's not another band like Danzig. Danzig sings like a cross between Jim Morrison and Elvis. If those two guys had a baby, which would probably be possible in the world of 2023 with all the stuff going on. That's pretty funny, right? If Elvis and Jim Morrison had a baby, you got Glenn Danzig, an evil Elvis, like satanic Elvis. That's what he sounds like, satanic Elvis, baby Danzig. Great album. The only quarrel that I have with Danzig music is I don't think that the bass guitar is up enough in the mix. You know, it's like you got to really listen for it to hear it. I mean, I just wish those albums were mixed with some more bottom end. It would give the music so much more intensity and balls. Here you go. The Beatles, Sgt. Pepper. I will admit, I'm not a huge Beatles fan, but there's no denying how great this album is, and I do listen to it occasionally. Sgt. Pepper, A Little Help from My Friends, great song. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Within You, Without You. Good Morning, Sgt. Pepper reprise, A Day in the Life. She's Leaving Home. Fixing a Hole, Getting Better. I'm kind of jumping around. I didn't go in order. Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. All this stuff is so great, so ahead of its time, experimental. I mean, these guys are really pushing the limits like nobody before or since, I have to say. Essential listening, The Beatles, Sgt. Pepper. Revolver is a great album too. I like both of those. Jeff Beck, Blow by Blow. This is my favorite instrumental rock album. I can listen to it every day. There was a period of my life when there was a girl that I was dating, and she liked him a little bit, and she turned me on to him. But, you know, once I heard this, it was no turning back for me. This album and the one that came after it from 1975 or 6 called Wired, to me, that's Jeff Beck's best work of these two albums. Although the album Jeff Beck Truth with Rod Stewart on vocals, that's a great one too. But everything on here, You Know What I Mean, She's a Woman, Constipated Duck, Air Blower, Scatterbrain, Because We've Ended as Lovers, Thelonious, Freeway Jam, and Diamond Dust. Everything on here is jazz, fusion, rock. His guitar playing is so good on here. His band is so good on here. He's got a great drummer, great young drummer, really good bass player. Again, all instrumental, no vocals. But you don't need vocals for this. He does all the talking with his guitar, trust me. If you know anything about this album, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Blow by blow, Jeff Beck. Def Leppard Hysteria. One of the greatest albums of the 80s. I'm not sure how many millions of albums how many millions of units this album has sold, but I know it's some kind of like astronomical number. They spent years making this album too. I mean, it's pretty much perfection. This one and Pyromania. But this one, I remember, you know, I'm showing you this because even though Pyromania was my first exposure to Def Leppard, you know, when they came on MTV, when they had songs like Photograph and Foolin', that's all from Pyromania. But this album was just like another level. The song Hysteria, Women, the song Animal, Love Bites. Oh man, this is just, they were all over MTV with these videos and these songs too. But this music is so good, man. This is definitely even a top 20 album for me, Def Leppard Hysteria. Here's another one that I don't have, but I have a substitute. Where is it? Where did you go? Where did you go? Here we go. Sorry about that. This is another one. I don't want to do like compilation albums, but this is the only one that I have. Bad Company 10 from 6, but the album that I really love from them, because I don't think that that's fair to do, like, you know, if you're doing like a top 20 or 50 or whatever many albums, you know, compilations, that's not really fair. I'm just based on studio work, like straight up album by album, not, you know, a greatest hits package and all that stuff. I mean, if it was greatest hits packages, I would probably pick greatest hits from every band that I'm talking about. But anyway, I'm showing you this because I don't have the other album that I'm going to tell you about with me. But Bad Company's first album, the first Bad Company album called Bad Company. It's a black cover with Bad Company written in white. Start to finish, there's not a bad song on the entire album. It's killer. There's like 4 or 5 tracks on there that were hits. I mean, so the whole album is pretty much a greatest hits album to begin with. And I've been listening to that a lot lately, Bad Company. Paul Rodgers has an awesome voice. Mick Rouse is a great guitar player. I mean, man. And I think they recorded that with John Bonham's drum set too, because as you know, if you know anything about Bad Company, they were signed to Led Zeppelin's label, Swan Song. Their first album, Bad Company, was released in 1974. There's a little bit of Bad Company history for you. What else we got here? Okay, here we go. Here we go. Let's see where you at. Okay. Now, originally when I did my top 20 list, I picked, what I tried to do was I just try to be fair about it and pick just one album from each band. I didn't want to pick 2 because, you know, I just want to be fair and try and get as many albums as I could in from different artists. But the more that I, you know, looked at my list and I started listening back to some of these things, it's like, I got to do a top 50. I can't do a top 20. And this is one of the reasons why, much like I showed you Pink Floyd, Animals, Wish You Were Here, Dark Side of the Moon, and The Wall, I have to show you this. Originally, I just picked this one, just like my shirt. This had such an impact on me when I first heard it. I mean, Good Times, Bad Times. Babe, I'm gonna leave you. You shook me. Dazed and confused. Your time is gonna come. Black Mountainside, Communication Breakdown. I Can't Quit You, Baby is probably the only track on here that I do not like. I skip through that every time. I don't like that version. There's a version on Coda, a live version that they took from the Royal Albert Hall in 1970. It's on the album Coda. That is a killer version, that live version of it. But this one kind of falls short for me, which you won't hear me say that often, that there's a Zeppelin song that I don't like. But if I had to say a few, this would be one of them. I Can't Quit You, Baby. And they end it with one of the most killer, heavy Zeppelin songs, and how many more times. Start to finish, this is an awesome album. This had such an impact on me when I was, 14 or 15. But this is the first album that I ever owned not on disc, but on vinyl. I believe my second or third episode way back, if you want to go back and check, I do a video called A First Album Owned, and I talk a lot about Led Zeppelin 2, the vinyl album that I have. This is the CD of it, obviously. This one probably had the most impact on me early on because it was the first one that I heard. I would come home every day from school, put the needle on that record and try and do my homework. But I didn't get much homework done. I did a lot of listening to this album, not a lot of work, but man, just the sounds that were just penetrating my ear from start to finish on this record. I've listened to it so much, it's in my DNA, I guess you could say. The opening track, Whole Lotta Love, What Is and What Should Never Be, the Lemon song. I can't tell you how many times I listened to the Lemon song. That bass line is so great. I didn't know much about bass guitar back then, but I knew something was going on when I heard that. John Paul Jones is just phenomenal on that song. Heartbreaker, Thank You, Livin' Lovin' Maid, Ramble On, Moby Dick, the iconic drum solo where he's playing with his hands halfway through, and Bring It On Home. I mean, solid riffs the whole way through, great vocals, great songwriting, killer drums, awesome bass lines. I mean, this is solid. This one in Zeppelin 1 doesn't get much better than that. To me, this is the greatest debut album from a rock band. The impact that this album had when it came out, nobody sounded like this. It was just like another level of musicianship, another level of production, another level of songwriting, another level of rock vocals. I mean, another level of rock drumming. I mean, I can go on and on and on about this. It's just, I still try and put myself back in the year 1969, knowing what type of music was going on, everything that was happening. You had Cream, you had Hendrix, you had Crosby, Stills, and Nash, you had all kind of stuff. Santana, MC5, you had Pacific Gas and Electric, you had Chicago, the whole Woodstock movement. You had CCR that was probably just starting to come out. The Who. I mean, you had all kind of stuff. But this was so different. And I mean, they've been imitated to death since then, especially in the 80s with a lot of hair metal bands. But when this came out, this must have blew people's minds. Because I know it did for me when I first heard it. Anyway, more essential Zeppelin listening. You need to have this in your collection. If you don't, go get it ASAP. Run out and get it as soon as you listen to this video. When this video is done, go run to your nearest store. Go on YouTube. Listen to it. Buy it. Go to eBay. Get yourself a copy. This is essential Led Zeppelin. Start to finish. It's got everything on here. Led Zeppelin 4. Who doesn't have Led Zeppelin 4? Black Dog, Rock and Roll, Stairway to Heaven, The Battle of Evermore, awesome song. Misty Mountain Hop, Four Sticks, I love Four Sticks. That riff is so killer. Nobody talks about Four Sticks. Why? It's great. I love it. Going to California and When the Levee Breaks. Solid, solid stuff. There is no collection without this. This is another one that I listen to constantly. This is another one that's in my DNA. Killer vocals from Ronnie James Dio. I love Vinny Appice's drums. I love the sound of Jimmy Bain's bass guitar. I love his tone. Vivian Campbell is a monster. He's one of my favorite 80s guitar players. That guy does not get mentioned enough. He's so tasty on this album. Not only is he super fast, but he's clean and he plays those slow notes. He's got sustain. He holds those notes when he needs to. There's a solo on here on the beginning of, it's Invisible. On the beginning of Invisible. Great, great song. Stand Up and Shout, Holy Diver, Gypsy, Caught in the Middle, Don't Talk to Strangers, Straight Through the Heart, Invisible, Rainbow in the Dark, and Shame on the Night. When I was in high school, I used to ride with a guy. He used to give me a ride, pick me up in his car. We used to ride to school together. And we'd smoke a little something or whatever, maybe not that morning. But anyway, all I remember is no matter what else we were doing, this was playing. And he had a really loud, killer sound system in his car. That was back when everybody was trying to compete with the next guy down the street. You know how good of a system they can have in their car. And he had a killer, loud-ass stereo system with some woofers in the back seat. I mean, it would just blow your eardrums out. But we used to crank this, jam the hell out of this album. And I can't go without this. This is awesome stuff. This one and Last in Line are both great. The Doors. You cannot go wrong with The Doors. This is probably my favorite Doors album. Break On Through, Soul Kitchen, The Crystal Ship, 20th Century Fox, Light My Fire, Backdoor Man, I Looked at You, End of the Night, Take It As It Comes, and one of my favorite songs, last but not least, The End. That is a great Doors song. I love the Doors so much. I don't think they get enough credit. I don't think they talked about enough. Along with CCR, that's another one of my favorite bands from the 60s. Those two bands were so good, man, even though they're totally different. I'm just saying, you hear a lot about the Beatles and the Beach Boys and Jimi Hendrix and Cream and The Who and all this other stuff. But the Doors, I know they get mentioned, but I'm just saying, like, if you just think about how original these guys were, there was nobody that sounded like the Doors. Also love CCR. I do not have any CCR with me, but I've been listening to a lot of CCR, and I've been listening to John Fogarty too. The album called Center Field from 1985 is a great solo album from John Fogarty. If you like CCR, I suggest you check that out. You've probably heard it before. What else we got? Essential Listening. Now I'm going to go with my first Rush album, Caress of Steel, Bastille Day, I Think I'm Going Bald, Lakeside Park, The Necromancer. That song is so awesome, The Necromancer. It's dark, it's heavy, the riffs, it's fast, it's slow. It starts off when he's telling a story about three men that are trapped in the forest, and the necromancer's going to cast a spell on them. I mean, it's just like, man, when I heard this when I was 14 or 15 years old, and you laying in your bed with the headphones on at night, and that voice comes on talking about three travelers from Willowdale trapped in the forest shadows. I mean, it's just like, what the hell am I listening to? And it is just mind-blowing stuff. People talk a lot about 2112 being that album that, elevated them to another level, but I would have to say this is just as good as 2112. I'm telling you. I mean, The Fountain of Lamneth is the whole second side. It goes start to finish. In the Valley, Didax and Narpets, No One at the Bridge, Panacea, Bacchus Plateau, and The Fountain. I mean, it's just all great, heavy, classic Rush. I love this album. Another favorite of mine, Farewell to Kings. I cannot say how many times I've listened to this album through the years, but it was just one of those albums that I had played constantly back in the day. I had a really good sound system in my parents' house, and I could just remember just blaring this thing. My mom and dad used to come in the room like, God, can you turn that down? It's so loud. I'm like, I don't care. Yeah, I'll turn it down. And they'd leave the room and I'd turn it back up again. I'd open up the windows and let everybody in the neighborhood hear it. Like, I was obnoxious with this album. It was like discovering something brand new. It was almost like I wanted other people to hear it because it was just so good. And you got to understand something. For me, all of my friends were not listening to this. All this stuff that I'm showing you, my friends were not listening to this stuff. You know, the stuff from the 80s and the 70s, mainly because, you know, once the 90s had passed, I didn't even see those friends anymore. I'm just talking about like the 80s and the 70s albums that I'm showing you now, like this one. When I was a teenager, my friends were not listening to this. They were listening to Poison, Warrant, Motley Crue, Trickster, Slaughter, Firehouse, Danger Danger, Bullet Boys, and all that other crap. I was listening to Rush and Pink Floyd and Sabbath and Zeppelin and Jethro Tull and Iron Maiden and Metallica. I mean, I was listening to music, you know what I mean? This, A Farewell to Kings, Xanadu. When I first heard Xanadu, I was like this. What the? I was like, oh my God, dude, this is so awesome. I'm like, I learned that on guitar and on bass, and it was just like, man, I got so good at learning that song, but it took me a little while because back then, all you had was your ears. You didn't have YouTube to watch somebody play it. You had to figure it out by ear. The song, Closer to the Heart. That's one of the ones I could kind of give a take. I've heard it so many times. It's like a radio-friendly song. Cinderella Man is awesome. Madrigal. Madrigal. Jiggle my madrigal. I hope that's not how you say it. I'm going to just call it Madrigal. And Cygnus X1. That's another one. Cygnus X1. Mind-blowing stuff. There's the back cover. There's the front cover. What does it have in here? Does it have pictures of them in here? That was another thing I used to love doing. When I had the albums or the CDs, I used to just like read the lyrics, you know, looking at the pictures of the guys. I have the album in the front too. That's one of the ones that I have the vinyl album to. So these two, Hemispheres is another one. I didn't take that one with me in the room, but I do have Hemispheres. That's another one that blew my mind. Listened to it constantly for years and years and years. I mean, I just wore it out. You know, the whole front side, Hemispheres. Side two, you have the trees, Circumstances, and La Villa Stragnato, however you want to say that. But this album I'm going to show you right now is the one that I've listened to the most over the last 2 or 3 years. And I kind of like, you know, didn't pay too much attention to it back then, even though I'd seen the cover before. But I was like, that's probably got too many keyboards and stuff in it, you know. But I gave it a shot, and it is a totally awesome album. Signals. Subdivisions, The Analog Kid, Chemistry, Digital Man, The Weapon, New World Man. That's the only one I don't care for. Losing It, that is a great song. Losing It is so good. And Countdown. I think it's the song Countdown that they actually witnessed Apollo 11 launch into space. They were invited to the Kennedy Space Center to see that. And Neil Peart wrote about his experiences with that, and they wrote the song Countdown about it. But, you know, there's a really good mix on this album of keyboards, guitar, and everything. I was always under the impression that this album was more like Power Windows and stuff, where The keyboards are really prominent. I did a video recently where I talk about Grace Under Pressure, which is another album that's so good in their catalog that gets overlooked. It's Signals and Grace Under Pressure back to back, and both of those albums came right after Moving Pictures. As great as Moving Pictures is, I would have to say that this one I favor over that one. And I guess some of the reason for that is because I'm more of like a deep track kind of guy than a hits kind of guy, even though there's no denying how many great songs are on Moving Pictures. I really love this album. And the album cover resonates with me too, with the dog. You know, I'm an animal lover, so when I see that, it kind of, you know, makes me pay more attention to it as well. But every song on here is great. Digital Man's got a killer riff. Chemistry's got a killer riff. Subdivisions is a great song. I had a video for that on MTV. You know, that's a hit song, but I mean, it's good. It's kind of dark. Analog Kid, another awesome song. The Weapon, Countdown. Like I say, I went over the track listing already, but this album is so good. If you one of the Rush fans or just an occasional Rush listener that doesn't know much about this album, I highly suggest that you go get it because you will not be disappointed. Oh, here you go. Here's Facelift when I was talking about Alice in Chains. This one and Dirt, that's my two. Now we go on to this band. When this album came out in 1988, I didn't know much about Metallica besides a handful of songs off of Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning that I had heard, you know, just from some occasional friends or whatever from high school. But when this came out, I was 15 and I bought it. And I played this album so much. I played it to death. Everybody that I knew was playing this album. It was like the thing back then. Track listing, Blackened, Injustice for All, Eye of the Beholder, One, The Shortest Straw, Harvester of Sorrow, The Frayed Ends of Sanity, To Live Is to Die, and Dyer's Eve. As far as a guitar album goes, this is an onslaught of guitar riffs. And you have not only one or two riffs per song, there's like 7 or 8 riffs in each track. I mean, some bands can make an entire song out of like 1 or 2 riffs on each track, but they got like so much stuff going on, you know, so many time changes. This is hands down Lars Ulrich's best work. You know, even when I'm playing air drums to it, as much as I have it memorized, there's still some beats that I notice that I miss sometimes because it's just so unorthodox, which I like. You know, he didn't keep it constant to where like once he gets into a beat, he kind of just stuck with that. Like, you know, he would throw in, you know, an occasional extra snare beat or an extra, you know, bass drum or something to kind of keep it interesting. And this is most definitely, as a whole, the band's greatest work as far as like just, you know, fearless. There's no, you know, besides the song One, there's no commercial songs on here whatsoever. This is all like straight up metal. This is, to me, one of the greatest metal albums in American metal history of all time, no doubt about it. Oh. And while I'm talking about Metallica, I'm going to show you another two that's essential listening. Master of Puppets and Ride the Lightning. You know, both of these, I did another video, a few videos back on Metallica having like the best 4 or 5 album run in metal history, and I still stick by that. These two are awesome as well. You know, on any given day, I could pick either one of these. I think they're equally as good. This one's a little bit darker and more gritty. This one's, you know, just a little bit better on production. Songs are just as good. But Injustice for All, that's definitely my most listened to Metallica album. I still love it. I mean, it's just, it's amazing that after all these years, however long this album's been out, you can listen to it, it still sounds fresh. I mean, nobody's writing music like this anymore, y'all. This is just straight up just guitar heaven. If you like heavy guitar rock, this is it. Now I'm going to kind of stick with the heaviness, and I'm going to go with Slayer, South of Heaven. That's one that you have to have if you're into thrash metal, heavy metal. This is a great album. Production-wise, it's great. It's got some really good songs on here. The opener, South of Heaven, Silent Scream, Live Undead, Behind the Crooked Cross, that's great. Mandatory Suicide, that's great. Ghost of War, that's a good one. Read Between the Lies, I love the lyrics on that. He talks about a preacher, just religion, crooked religion. Cleanse the Soul, don't really remember that one too much. Dissident Aggressor, first time I heard Dissident Aggressor was from, I didn't even realize that this was a Judas Priest remake. I thought it was just a Slayer song. They did an awesome job. And it ends with Spill the Blood. Awesome. This album and Rain and Blood are essential Slayer. Seasons in the Abyss, pretty good too, but I prefer this one. This is my favorite Slayer album. If I'm in the mood to get heavy, hear some killer drums and stuff, this is the album that I put on. Pantera, Vulgar Display of Power. Another awesome, brutal, guitar-heavy album. This came out, when was this? 92? I was a big fan. Listened to it a lot. Haven't listened to it a lot recently, but I won't forget the impression that it left on me when I was, 19, 20 years old. I was listening to this a lot. This was what was going on back in 92. This, Slayer, some Metallica. Now we're going to move on to Judas Priest. This is my favorite Judas Priest album, Stained Class. It's got some great stuff. Exciter, White Heat, Red Hot, Better by You, Better Than Me. That's a popular Priest song. Stained Class, that's one of my favorites on here, is the title track. Invader, Saints in Hell, that's a heavy, heavy song, Saints in Hell. Savage, Beyond the Realms of Death, Heroes End. Great stuff. If you like Judas Priest, this is essential Judas Priest. This one and British Steel, that's my two favorites from Priest. Now here's another album that I don't have the particular one that I'm talking about, but I do have Classic Yes, which is I guess you would say it's a compilation at that point, like a best of at this point in time. This is from 1981, so this is a collection of songs from the beginning all the way until that time, 1981. But the two albums that I want to talk about from Yes is Fragile and the Yes album, which I should have brought it in here because I have the vinyl of the Yes album, and Fragile. Starship Trooper, The Fish, Roundabout, all those songs, that's classic Yes. They actually have a few of them on here. Heart of the Sunrise, Roundabout, You and I, Starship Trooper, Long Distance Runaround, Wondrous Stories, I've Seen All Good People. Yes is one of those bands that has never been copied before because they're so original. They're impossible to duplicate. Awesome guitar, phenomenal drums, phenomenal bass playing from Chris Squire. Bill Bruford left in 1972 to form King Crimson with Robert Fripp, but to me, the classic Yes lineup is awesome. Alan White took over in 1972 after Bill Bruford left. They made some great classic albums after that too. But Yes is a band that I've been listening to a lot lately. Yes, Fragile. Yes, the Yes album. And Yes, Closer to the Edge. If you want to kind of get into that type of music, if you don't know about them already, that's the three essentials that I recommend. And here we go. We're going to go with, Houses of the Holy. I forgot to mention this when I was doing my Zeppelin lineup. This one, this was one of the cassettes that I got. Well, this is obviously a CD, but I had the cassette of this when I joined BMG Music Club in Columbia House. those music clubs where you could get like 15 CDs for a penny or something crazy, whatever it was. And when I first put on Houses of the Holy, when I had heard the first song, The Song Remains the Same, it was so pristine. The guitars are so clean and crisp and kind of twangy. And then you had some overdubs with some heavy guitars and some bluesy guitars and like almost a country sounding guitar all blended together. It was just a perfect opening track for this album. You have that, then you have the Rain song, which is one of the greatest Led Zeppelin songs of all time. That is such a great, soothing song. The Rain song, it's moody, it's eclectic. The whole album is eclectic. This is, as far as atmosphere goes, this is my favorite Led Zeppelin album as far as the atmosphere. And this is like a mini version of Physical Graffiti. And what I mean by that is you have a little bit of everything on here. Even though Physical Graffiti is a double album, obviously you have more to choose from. But of these 8 tracks, I mean, listen to this variety. The Rain song, The Song Remains the Same, Over the Hills and Far Away, which is like a straight up rock track. You have The Crunge, which is like a tribute to James Brown or something. It's real funky. They kind of, you know, it's a real playful song. I don't think they're trying to be too serious, but, you know, it's just showing a different side of Led Zeppelin in a good way. Dancing Days, which is kind of like, you know, that riff is kind of Middle Eastern, but it's, you know, it's got a good rock sound to it. That's a really obscure song, Dancing Days. You don't hear too many songs like that from Zeppelin. It's just, it's different is all I could say. Dire Maker, which is, you know, a pun on Jamaica. No Quarter, absolutely one of my favorite Zeppelin songs. John Paul Jones with that iconic keyboard intro. And then Jimmy Page comes in with one of those famous guitar riffs. And it ends with The Ocean, which is kind of like an upbeat rock song. So you got a little bit of everything on here. As a whole package, from the music to the album cover, which is like, I mean, does it get any better than that? The mystery that surrounds that, you know? I mean, you probably couldn't come out with something like that these days because people would be in an uproar about naked children. And I say that, but, you know, with all the political stuff going on, maybe it's okay, I don't know. But anyway, you know, think about, this came out the year I was born, 1973 this came out, it's 50 years old. Just think about when people saw that. And then you have the inside. You have the inside cover. Let's see if it's on here. I don't know if the CD part shows it. Let's see. I don't want to rip things up. I don't want to rip it up. Here you go. Check that out. There's no telling what that is, huh? Sacrificing a teenage girl to a sun god? Who knows? All I know is this. The music that was on here was so potent to my mind, along with that album cover. I listened to this thing constantly, like I did a lot of other albums that I've showed you, that I got that. You see that? I got that when I was 27. That's the inside cover that I just showed you, and it still looks awesome. Guy did a great job on it. But that's, you know, that's kind of like my ode to the album. Just lasting impression that it left on me. And there's the picture of what he did on my arm. So yeah, Led Zeppelin, Houses of the Holy, that's essential Led Zeppelin. And I'm going to go ahead and finish it up with a few last ones. I'm going to do ACDC Back in Black. I am a Brian Johnson ACDC fan. I like Bon Scott, don't get me wrong. I mean, he's the original singer. They had great stuff with him. The whole Highway to Hell album. One of my favorite ACD albums is, what's the one with him where it does Whole Lot of Rosie and stuff like that. I can't remember the name of the album, but anyway, it'll come to me right after I'm finished doing this video. But the album that has Whole Lot of Rosie on it with Bon Scott, that is a great album. But this, everything on here is so good. Hell's Bell is one of my first songs I've ever heard from AC/DC. Shoot to Thrill. What do you do for money? Give the dog a bone. Let me put my love into you. Back in Black. You Shook Me All Night Long. I hope I never hear that song ever again, please. That's just one song like Sweet Home Alabama that if I never hear it again, I'm okay with that. Have a Drink on Me, Shake a Leg, and Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution. That is an awesome song. Love this album to death. I mean, it's great. What a comeback this was. After just losing their singer, they come out with such an iconic album like this. Strong stuff. I'm still trying to think of the name of that album with Bon Scott. Oh man, that's going to drive me nuts. Especially if I'm doing a video and I can't remember the name of it. Anyway, it's got a whole lot of Rosie on it and some other things. Before I forget, there's a few other albums that I want to mention that I don't have any evidence of around me. 5150 from Van Halen. That is the first album with Sammy Hagar, and that is one of those albums that I just listened to all the time when it came out. That came out in 1986, and I was 13. I don't think I got it right when it came out, but shortly after, so I was probably 14, 15 years old like I was when I heard most of these albums that I showed you today. Good Enough, Summer Nights, Dreams, Love Comes Walking In, the song 5150. There's so many good songs on that album. Sammy Hagar is a great singer. They really upped their game. They had mature songs. Their songwriting became more of a mature songwriting quality. There's great production on that album. The album cover with the strong guy, you know, holding up the weight of 5150. I mean, that says a lot right there. I love albums that you kind of have to think a little bit, or it has like an alternate meaning to what the album name is, and that's definitely one of those. But that is probably my favorite Van Halen album. And like I say, that was one of the ones that I got from BMG Music or Columbia House that I listened to on cassette over and over and over and over again. That is one of the albums, just like Hysteria from Def Leppard, ZZ Top's Eliminator. I remember hearing that, and Afterburner. I had both of those on cassette. Those are two great ZZ Top albums. RATT, Dancing Undercover. I am a huge RATT fan. I love RATT. I think they're one of the greatest metal bands of the 80s, or rock and roll bands of the 80s, rather. I'm not sure if you want to put them in the hair metal category or not. I know that's kind of an insult. Hair metal, you know, I kind of get why they call it that, but I understand why, you know, some people might not like to be called in that category because it's kind of limits yourself. But anyway, RATT is just one of those bands that I love. I have Invasion of Your Privacy on vinyl. Out of the Cellar is a great album. But Dancing Undercover was one of those, along with my Zeppelin 2, that I listened to back and forth. I used to alternate between my Zeppelin 2 vinyl and my RATT Dancing Undercover on cassette. I love the way those cassettes smelled, the clear tape cassettes. They almost had like a patchouli type smell to them. But all the songs on there, the opening track, I can go off of memory. Dance, you had 7th Avenue, you had Slip of the Lip, you had Body Talk. There's just so many good songs on that album. I love it, love it, love it. That is probably my favorite RATT album, Dancing Undercover, and that is essential listening for me. Here's another one, Megadeth. Megadeth was a band that I never gave too much of a chance to back in the 80s. You know, I liked Metallica and everything, but Megadeth, I think it was Dave Mustaine's voice that kind of turned me off. You know how he used to do, there's quite a few songs where he kind of does that, hello me, it's just me, kind of, you know, all that kind of stuff that he does. Well, there's a few songs where he kind of does that voice, and I was just kind of like, no, I don't really want to go there with that, you know. I think his vocals pretty much turned me off from really digging deep into their catalog and listening to anything further. But let me tell you, Rust in Peace, that is a phenomenal metal album. Five Magics, Tornado of Souls, Hangar 18, everything on that album is gold. That is my favorite Megadeth album, one I've listened to constantly over the last few years. I mean, there's probably not a month that goes by that I don't listen to that thing probably 2 or 3 times for at least a few days in a row. Another one that I really love from Megadeth is Peace Sells. Like I say, that's one that I never really paid too much attention to back then. I could have never told you anything about it as far as the songs go, besides what the album cover looked like. But that is one that is also probably equally as good as Rust in Peace. I mean, they have a really good 4-album run. Peace Sells, So Far So Good So What. Rust in Peace, you have, what is it, Countdown to Extinction? Is that the next one? Or is it Euthanasia? Yeah, I think Euthanasia came after Countdown. So those 4 or 5 albums, that is a really strong run. That gave Metallica a run for their money, even though I think Megadeth was always a step behind Metallica. They still had some really strong material. So that's something I've been jamming with a lot lately is Megadeth Peace Sells. You have to have this. Heaven and Hell. Now, originally when I did my list, I had, like I say, when I only picked 1 album per band, I had Volume 4. Volume 4 is probably my favorite album with Ozzy and Sabbath. Supernaut, Snowblind, which is one of my favorite Sabbath songs. Wheels of Confusion, Under the Sun. There's all kind of stuff on there. It's just that album is so good. Volume 4. It's, you know, one of those albums that's not talked about a lot in Sabbath's catalog. But as far as my favorite album with Dio, it's no doubt Heaven and Hell, Neon Nights, Children of the Sea, Lady Evil, the song Heaven and Hell, Wishing Well, awesome song, Die Young, Walk Away, and the bluesy, oh God, I love this last song, Lonely is the Word. It's slow, it's menacing, and there's not a lot of lyrical content to it, but you know, he kind of sets you up for the music. And there's a long guitar solo at the end, which is probably Tony Iommi's best guitar solo work on this album, period. This album is, this is like a totally different band when Dio joined. And that's why when I started making my initial top 20 list, which then grew to 50, I was like, you know, I can include 1 album with Ozzy and 1 from Dio, because after all, I mean, even though it's still called Black Sabbath, to me, it's a totally different sounding band altogether. I mean, it's just like, just the music's just different, you know. I mean, you can obviously tell that it's Tony Iommi still. I mean, he's still got his style, but as far as like just the approach of the music, it is just, it's a lot faster. It's more 80s, so to speak, if that makes any sense. So this one, and also I have Mob Rules. That's an awesome album too. Country Girl, Slipping Away. The opening track, Mob Rules. What is that? Sign of the Southern Cross. God, that is some good stuff. But I just want to throw this in, Paranoid, because this was the first Sabbath album that I owned. They had a store called Kmart where I used to live when I was a young lad. And me and a few friends of mine would go in and look through all the music tapes, the cassettes, and I bought Paranoid on cassette, and the first time I played War Pigs, and I heard War Pigs and Paranoid and Iron Man and Electric Funeral and Hand of Doom and Fairies Wear Boots, I was like, God, this is the greatest shit I've ever heard in my life. It was so killer. It was just like, it was so menacing and dark and evil and heavy, and just the riffs all at the same time. And just to think about when this came out, and I'm listening to that in my headphones, and I'm going, my God, this is so freaking awesome. And that's why I wanted to show this, because the impact that this had, I mean, I haven't listened to this album in so long, and I really don't need to anymore, because I've heard these songs so many times. And if I never hear Paranoid again, I'm totally fine with that. Like, I'm to the point where I just don't want to listen to it anymore. But if I hear War Pigs, or if I hear Fairies Wear Boots on the radio, I'll listen to it. Iron Man, I'd probably fast forward to, but just going back and put myself back in time, the impact that this had on me was so profound. I just wanted to mention it. And so that is pretty much my list of essentials at the moment. I hope you enjoyed this video. This is a lengthy one. This is an hour-long video, so Yeah, so that's what I've been getting down with lately. I've also been listening to some James Brown and some Fats Domino and kind of switching it up. You know, I don't listen to all metal or all rock, but I wanted to show you these. I hope you have a great weekend or whenever you're watching this, and I'm going to enjoy the rest of my Sunday. It was good to make another video again. I'm glad that I'm over that physical ailment scare that I had. I look forward to doing more soon. And like I always say at the end of my videos, until next time, y'all keep rocking and stay safe.